Hey, what's up, everybody? We're up for a new edition of Spooky Tales. Here this evening, we have Brickey. He is an author of some homegrown horror. Right here in Monroe, Michigan, he's had some insane experiences. We're going to dive right into it. By the way, this episode is brought to you by Spooky Films and We Handle Candles. Now, the first question I want to ask you is, when and where did this happen in this hometown?
Okay, when it first happened, I was probably around in my early teens, and it happened right. I won't give the exact location of the house, but it's very renowned. It's a farmhouse located.
It's known for it?
Very known, yeah.
Okay.
It's still to this day, the community's been quite aware of it. So I'll say it's on Vivian Road, but I won't for specifics for respect of the current owners.
Understood.
So
very understood.
When I was growing up in my early teens, my friend's family rented this farmhouse, and I used to go over there to spend time with them. And from one of the very first times that I actually went over there for a visit, I experienced right off the set. It just happened immediately. And that was the first time I had ever witnessed anything. I had never even thought about paranormal incidents or anything like that.
Was it a good experience, or was that was it scary, or was it just abnormal to you? You know what I mean?
Terrifying. It was terrifying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. If you want to give some more detail on that first paranormal experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went in it was like during the summertime. It was hot outside, and back then, your parents would drop you off at the house and leave you to be. And I had set up a time to come over, and when I got there, I walked in the house. Nobody locked the doors. I just ran in the house, said hi. Was calling out to people. When you first go in the house, it goes an incline upstairs. Went into the living room, was calling around, didn't hear anybody. But I immediately got a weird sensation. It was really cold.
How old were you exactly?
I'd probably say I was probably about 13 or 14.
Okay, I'm thinking you're a young kid.
Yeah, just in my early teens. And so I'm in there, and first thing that caught my attention was it was really cold in there. For being a hot outside, it was probably like I think I want to say it was like July or August. So it was definitely a hot day. And I'm in there, and immediately I start hearing someone walking upstairs. And I could clearly hear the footsteps thudding around, going back and forth. And I knew it was coming from my friend's bedroom. So I thought he's up there. So I ran up the stairs, ran into the room. Nobody's in there. So I'm looking around for him. I thought they were playing a joke. So I went to the next room. Nobody's in there. Totally empty.
How many rooms were upstairs
that
you had to go through? You know what I mean?
There's 3 bedrooms, a bathroom, and there's an attic up there. So I walked around, and there's a library as well. The library was converted to a bedroom for some. So looking around, obviously there was no one up there. So from that point, I just felt weird, like it was kind of being watched. Mm-hmm. But I had nothing to base that upon. It wasn't like something I had gone through before. It was just an unease. So I went back downstairs, looked around. Nobody was in there. So I got on the phone, and their neighbor that was a couple houses down, sometimes we would go over to their house. So their number was available there. So I called over there to see if maybe they just went out of the house for a moment. And as I'm down the number...
Corded phone, clearly.
Yeah, right.
There's no cell phones at this time,
At this time, it was the old rotary phone on the wall. So the phone was set up from the hallway, from the entrance of the upstairs. So as I'm dialing the number, I start hearing, and this is an old house, so the floorboards, any movement on there, it creaks, you can hear it.
No carpets or anything like that through there?
There's carpet, but the stairs are so hollow and the sound really carries.
I got you. I understand.
So as soon as I'm on the phone, I hear footsteps coming down the stairs. And I can hear them, first getting a little bit from off in the distance. I can hear them making their way down, and they're getting louder and louder and louder, and they start coming around the corner. And at that point, I'm looking, and my eyes are like saucers. I'm waiting and watching for someone to come. Nobody's there. So I just freaked out, and I ran out of the house. They had a little, like an island where the car would turn around, and they had a rock there. So I went on there, sat down for a second, collected myself, because I didn't have no way to call anyone besides.
Right, like I said, this is before cell phones.
Yeah,
Monroe wasn't even industrialized at this point. You know what I mean?
I'm like SOL. I'm like stranded down here.
Yeah.
So I'm looking around, and like not even 5 minutes later, their van pulls up, and they come out, and they're like, "Hey, sorry, we were out driving around," and I'm like, "You'll never believe what I saw."
So you're in the house. Let me get this right. You're in the house by yourself, but you hear people running around the house, and then the family that you thought was in the house pulls up in a vehicle.
They come in, they all get out of there, and I'm like, "You're not going to believe this," and like, Oh, the ghost? Yeah, we know about it. I'm like, what? You know?
Oh, they were comfortable with it.
Yeah, it was like because
Okay.
they had lived there for a couple of years already. They moved into that place probably in the, I want to say maybe 78, 79, 77, somewhere around that point.
Right.
So they'd been there a couple of years. By the time I was in there, it was probably maybe 82 or so, and there was no mistaking the sound that was coming up there. I mean, you can hear.
You know when it steps. You know the difference between the scratching of an animal or the rustle of an animal or just a bipedal creature walking.
Absolutely. When somebody
You know what
tells
I
you
mean.
floorboards creak and that, there's a difference between sound footsteps and somebody moving.
Yeah,
around.
especially when it's coming step after step after step down towards you. It's not like it ran down the steps. It's this step, that step, that step.
So that was my indoctrination, and I was terrified. I was just like, man, that's just crazy.
So you knew about
I
heaven, hell, and stuff
yeah.
like
I
that.
definitely
Did
believe-
that play into your mind at all? Did you think it was? What did you think it was?
No, from that point, as a kid, reading stories and stuff, you knew about ghosts and things like that, but I didn't have any concept of entities or type of demons or things like that. I mean, I had seen movies and things that scared the shit out of me, and but for this, it was more, something that it was concrete. It was something I could tangible that I witnessed myself, and I didn't think in terms of good and evil. I didn't think in terms of religion. I just knew that I'm witnessing things, and this is real. From
No way to deny it.
no, from a fictional point where you're growing up and hearing ghost stories to the point where you're witnessing it and you're living it. So it's something.
So you spent a lot of time at this house, right?
a lot, yeah.
Did it affect you at all outside of this house? Is it something you thought about, or is it just something you look forward to, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, both. I would say, as you mentioned earlier, the adrenaline. Having something like that you shared with others, having something impactful that most people don't have a chance to witness that or experience that. And when they hear about it, they want to be able to have tangible things that they can see and say, yeah, I saw a ghost or that. So to actually go through that and experience that thing, it was unique. It was something I look forward to. Things that go over there. It wasn't something. It was kind of I've always.
It's like getting high without doing drugs.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? That's how it feels. That's the way it feels.
I've always been a fan of horror movies, horror genre, horror books, and the melding of that too, and having something where, I was excited about it. And you always hear this from other people is that, and even people that I know that lived in there, you want to see something and you want to maybe disprove something, but you don't want to see something. It's like someone saying, I don't believe there's ghosts, but if I see it, and they're like, but I don't want to see it. I don't want to see
I understand.
book move across the table.
Yeah. Have you checked into the history of that house? I was considering, is it just a void? Is it one of them portals? Or has anybody died in that house or anything like that,
I can go by myself as far as looking up the history. I did not, but when I was growing up there, my friend's mother was very book smart. She read on all kind of subjects. She was very open to these things, and she studied the history of the place. She used to go up to the library. She would do research on it, and she provided us information of a couple of deaths there. And she had mentioned about a death in the attic, and that area there was built upon.
Was it a murder or was it a natural death or how'd that go? Did you?
A suicide.
Oh.
So, to my knowledge.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
But there was a history of the land there, and the original house, the original property, the house was built on another location of the yard, and the neighbors there, so they had relocated it. Of course, the area is known for battlegrounds, and I remember growing up too. They had a garden out there, and we would go out there, and they were always we'd dig and find pottery, and we'd find Indian relics, and we'd find cups and things like that in that area.
That's awesome.
So we
That's
knew
awesome.
for real. It wasn't just like, okay, this myth that maybe this happened, but
Well, think of the whole, General Custer battlefield and everything. I've heard, according to sightings and reports, Monroe was the most haunted place in Michigan. According to reports, according to populace. But that river raising battlefield was bloody. General Custer wasn't no joke. He was pretty ruthless. His house still stands today, too. I wonder if that one's haunted,
probably is. Yeah,
It
I would
could
say,
be.
there's so much tragedy, there's so much sorrow that you would think that there's, whether it's residual or there's just the spirits have to go somewhere. So it's
Right. I always wondered about that. if a spirit's trapped in a house and the house is torn down, are they finally free? You know what I mean? I always wondered about that. Is it the grounds that they were killed on?
Right.
You know, I always wonder about things like that.
I don't think they're held to a certain boundary. I would think that, you know, whether it's an open land, I mean, you hear so much that, you know, they're able to move, whether they, it depends on the type of spirit, you know.
Right. There are many different ones.
Somebody.
Sometimes I wonder if it's just a normal ghost, a person that died, if Earth is their purgatory. You didn't get to heaven, you didn't get to hell, you're on Earth. You know what I mean?
I
kind of a purgatory for a ghost.
Yeah,
like you're just stuck here. It's just a very, very mellow scene. It's very droopy, gloomy. You know, you're just reliving basically everything you've been living.
I think there's so many scenarios with that. I'm a firm believer that if somebody dies unexpectedly or they have unfinished business, and that's common that you hear that, but somebody maybe, you know, they have a holiday coming up, they have a loved one that they care about, they're worried about, they're not ready to move on, they haven't finished something, they still want to get a message across. That's where that purgatory that they're kind of hanging out. Or maybe it's so sudden that they're stuck there. So whether it's an unhappy moment for them and a tragedy, or they want to be there, they want to be with somebody. So I'm sure there's a lot of different situations that might, you know, why a person would stick around there.
This is one question I've really been wondering, and this is gonna pretty much solidify your haunting. How often do the new residents stay? You know, it's been quite a while. Has it had one owner and they just stayed there? Does it have multiple owners? Do they rent the house? You know, what's the average time scale somebody stays in that house? You know what I mean?
I would say, and I've had kind of the pleasure of meeting different families that have moved in there since my friend's family resided there back in the 70s, the 80s. They moved out probably in the mid 80s. And then I had a chance to a friend of mine's girlfriend actually moved in at some point after them.
Okay.
And it was just it was funny because we were just talking about haunted experiences and things that we grew up. And she said, "Oh, I grew up in this house, and you never believe the things that happened. They had this and such on the wall." And my friend he was so, you know, they had crosses, they had glow in the dark crosses that you know, for protection, and she was recounting that in her bedroom. She goes, "My bedroom used to have this. I don't know who used to live there before, but they painted this stuff on here." And as she was talking, I realized she was talking about that same house. And I'm like, "Is it this house on Vivian?" She goes, "Yeah."
That's extremely interesting.
Crazy. And she was talking about the same type of experience we witnessed. After my book came out, I got contacted by a family that was currently living in there, and they were reading over the book, and they were concerned about incidents that were happening in their daily life and things that were actually that they read about. And they wanted to know what was factual, what was fictional.
They were curious too.
Yeah.
You know.
So they mentioned about that, and they wanted they offered me a chance to come back to the house to go in there and kind of sit down with them and talk about things. And that was the first time I'd been back in there since probably, like I said, the mid 80s, and this was 2000.
Oh, so you revisited?
A couple times. Yeah,
okay.
So that was the first time.
Okay.
So I had a period of about 10 years where I hadn't been back in the house, and I got invited back in there. I walked back in there. Actually, I'll share an interesting story. So this is.
Let's hear it.
So
always eager for an interesting story, man.
I'm
always eager. That's why we do this podcast.
I'm divulging this, but so when my book first came out, the house was actually when I was working on it. The house was at a period of flux where nobody was renting it. It was up for rent. And a friend of mine that grew up in the house, she lived out of state, but her father lived there. And she would come during the summers to stay there, and she witnessed stuff. She was very skeptical. We were talking about it, and she mentioned that the house was still for rent. And I said, "Well, let's go by there. We'll drive by." So we went by there, and we looked at the house, and we actually called the current owners to see about a tour. And he says, "Well, I'm available right now. I can walk you in there. We'll go on a tour of the house." So he shows us in. And before she goes in, she goes, the one room I don't remember at all that I really want to visit is our parents' bedroom, because it was kind of off limits for the kids. You know, yeah, they could go in there, but for the most point,
As a young kid, you're just not allowed in the parents' bedroom.
And
I used to go in there and
that's
steal
where-
candy from the drawer. Not allowed. That's why I wasn't allowed.
That's where a lot of the activity happened in this place. So that was one of the focal points. So when we first walked in and the owner wanted to show us rooms, first place he took us to, by chance, was the parents' bedroom. So he goes in there, he flips on the light switch, the light bulb blows out. Just psh. We look at each other and we just start laughing. So I had a camera.
Because you already know the drill.
Yeah. So it's like,
You know,
okay, it's
you
like a
lived
welcome
through
back.
it.
So I took some pictures. None of the pictures really came out. They were just like blurry. So that's just the first time I'd been back in there. I'm like, okay, it was like being in a time machine going back and visiting. So,
Right. And they gave you a warm welcome for sure.
Warm welcome.
Definitely warm welcome.
So when I got contacted by this other family that was living in there, they had me come back in. They were recounting some really truly disturbing things that, for example, like they'd be sleeping in bed, and the room next to them was their baby's room, and the baby had a monitor, and they would hear during the night the baby screaming and crying, and she knew the sound of her baby, so she'd get up, she'd go to the next room, check on the baby would be sound asleep, so she'd go back in the room, lay back down. Again,
Ooh.
the monitor would go off, and the kid was crying and screaming. She'd get up,
For some reason, a baby crying is more scary than a whisper in your ear.
So,
You know what
after
I mean?
a while, she's kind of perplexed. So the husband wakes up and goes, "What are you doing?" She's like, "Well, the baby's crying, but the baby's not crying." She goes, "I know the sound of my baby, and sometimes interference from another signal might come through the." She goes, "That was my child crying."
Like a mimic almost, like it's trying to mimic your child. That's even worse. That's like a worm on a hook. Like, come to this room.
Right. Like
You know what I mean?
like there's something that we want to show you. So he was very skeptical about the house as well, and she and her kids were witnessing things left and right. And it came points where he was like upstairs taking a shower, and she recounted how he's in there, and all of a sudden they had this baby potty chair. So when a child goes, it would start playing music. So he's in there taking a shower, and all of a sudden that music starts playing.
The potty chair played music.
Nothing's in there, nothing's affecting it, but it just happens to start playing while he's in there. So he thinks that's pretty weird. So he goes down in the basement. He's got a little workshop room. He's working on some tools. The dryer kicks on and starts going. It's a brand new dryer, so it's not like there's an electrical problem with it. She said they just recently got it.
Yeah.
So it's going.
Yeah, that is
So
that's a
now-
lot. Did the knob turn or did it just kick on?
Push on button.
Okay, so something pushed the button.
Yep.
Okay, got you. It takes force.
Yeah.
Because I've had push start dryers. You can't just drop a feather on it like it's gonna. You know what I mean? It's not just gonna start like that.
Yeah.
You have to push force on it.
At that point, I had, for years, I had people ask me about the house, and I had paranormal groups from Toledo to the west side of the state want to go in and investigate this house. So I always was respectful because I didn't know the people living there. But until I had met them, then I had the okay to say, okay, I'll bring in a group for you and have somebody look at it, which I did, and we brought some people in. And
Equipment fully ready to go,
Yep,
all that,
we had
EVPs, all that good
a
stuff.
Psychic in there. We had Christy Robinette came in. We sat there. We each had a little bit of experience, but at first
Here's to see how that went.
it was kind of quiet. Nothing was going on. It was one of those days where we had all the windows open. We're trying to provoke. We're trying to bring out things. Nothing. So everybody went on their own. We went in a sunroom. Some people went down in the basement. Some people went upstairs.
You all had equipment, or some of you was just
some people had equipment.
Okay.
Some people had dowsing rods, and then they were in the basement. And then myself and another person was in a sunroom, and then they came. The people that were down in the basement came upstairs and said, "You know what? We're having something really interesting going on. We're getting some readings," and she had the ability to connect. And she says, I feel there's a spirit of a boy that's in here. But we think because your history with this house, we think that you might be able to spark something, maybe generate something, be able to connect with whoever's here.
right.
So I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I went down there just myself.
It was pretty playful.
Yeah.
Oh boy, I wouldn't think like a young kid would be that malevolent. You know what I mean? Just more confused than anything.
So the terrifying thing is, so everyone else went upstairs, and I went downstairs with one other person, and she was using the dowsing rods. And at first, and I've watched paranormal shows where they they've utilized these. And, it's sometimes for myself, I'm not like, I'm scientific about things, and I want a good.
Yeah. Most of the time you can't. You can. Most of the time you can.
You can explain an orb on a camera and a photograph. You can explain.
Yeah, easily.
Creeks. So when she was utilizing those, I wanted for myself to be able to, when utilizing these, to know that I'm controlling these and I'm not turning my hands, making pushing my agenda on it. So she gave them to me. I held them, and we asked pointed questions to whoever was down there.
Those are yes or no questions, correct? Yes, they cross, no, they stay.
Right.
Okay. Kind of like a pendulum. You ever played with one of those? Yeah, just like a pendulum. I understand.
So we're in tight quarters where, and probably no wider maybe than this room. So she's sitting there in a chair. I'm sitting like here, facing her. On the shelf, she's got a camera, a video recording everything, and it's over my shoulder, and we're asking them questions. Immediately, she goes, "Hold on a second, stop." So she goes over there, and she looks, and her camera batteries are dead, totally drained. She said, "I totally."
That's common.
Yeah.
When it comes to paranormal, they will just they will suck. Right. You ever heard that where they feed off energy? The more you think about them, the more you'll see them. It's the same with an electrical current. You have electrical currents going through your body. You know what I mean? So it would make total sense for it to just drain a battery.
I believe so. And those are things that you start building, a foundation. Okay, this is happening. This is just not just random things. Now I'm building something, concrete that, there's something going on here. So first, then the battery drains. And then we're sitting there, and we're asking questions. And we ask, is there anyone in here? And sure enough, the rods start moving.
Mm-hmm.
So yes answer. And I said, okay, all right. And I'm making sure I'm not moving anything. And then she says...
We got some water right here in case you didn't know.
She says, are you, I ask, are you a child or are you an adult? And then I said, are you a child? And again, it moves, it responds. And then so we kind of get, as far as, okay, this is what we're dealing with here.
So it was a child.
Right.
Okay.
So as it's happening, and I'm really focused on this, I'm not making this move. And all of a sudden, the dryer kicks on.
Again.
We're talking, the
for a second time.
Well, not before when I was there. This is the first time that I witnessed. That happened before with the husband that was always working down there.
Oh, the first one was a story you heard. The second one you actually witnessed. Was it the same dryer?
Same dryer. So,
okay.
So I look at it, and the dryer is real, low level, so that somebody small could get up there and put their hands on it. So I'm like, wow. So
that's a good point. That's a good point.
I'm like, okay. Now I start kind of chuckling to myself. So I stop and I said, "Did you do that? Was that you that turned that on?" And immediately the rods it wasn't just a small move. They were just flying back and forth.
Boom, just straight up said, I did do that.
That is freaky. So the weirdest thing that happened now is I'm sitting there, and the one thing I couldn't, some things you can say, okay, an electrical problem or the battery, maybe something, explain that. The one thing I knew for sure is I'm sitting there, and I get chills now thinking about it, but I felt fingers on my back, like cold fingers, rape. So if like a kid went up to you and went like that, to tease you and pull on you, I felt that right on my back, all the way down, and to the point where I stretched up, and she's like,
when somebody comes and tickles the back of your neck, you're gonna sit up straight,
And she looked at me, she goes, "What's the matter?" I said,
"Perfect."
I gathered myself. I said, "You won't believe this." I said, "Someone just touched me, not just touched me, but fingers." I felt all the way down my back.
Both hands.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm like, "Oh my God!" And so we asked. I said, "Did you do that?" And again, it's responding. So we got to the point where we're talking. They wanted the child to feel that they could leave. They weren't trapped there. Was there someone else in the house? First, we asked, "You can go," and there was no response. And then it was like, "Okay, are you afraid to go? Is there something that's preventing you? Is there someone else here?" And it responds and says, "Yes." So at that point, she's like, "Well, you don't have to be afraid. You can leave." And no response back. We never heard no movement. I didn't hear anything back. The dryer didn't go. I didn't feel any connection there.
Was that the last time you were at the house?
Yes.
So that's your last experience?
The last real creepier experience. After that had happened, then we went, everybody took a break. So I kind of recounted the story to them. But then we said, okay, we're all going to take a break. Everyone's going to go outside. Uh-huh. I stuck around in the house because there was 2 places that I hadn't been yet that I really wanted to look at. I wanted to go upstairs to my friend's bedroom where I heard those footsteps where for all my time growing up there, I spent.
You thought about that for years, obviously.
Yeah, I always wanted to go back. I wanted to see the attic.
I understand.
The attic was such a hot spot that it was one of those ladders with a pull string that you'd pull down.
I know what you're talking about.
And when we were kids growing up, I mentioned that we would kind of scare ourselves, so we dared ourselves to go. We took some cots where we went upstairs, and some blankets, and we were going to sleep up there during the night. No light up there. We left the lights all dark. The only thing you had was some light coming through the window. We weren't up there more than maybe a half hour at that, where we started hearing things moving around. Could have been mice. Could have been
How big
anything.
was the attic? Describe it. Was it a bungalow style attic, or was it did it have rooms in it, or was it one big open
one
room?
big open room? So
Okay.
you had lighting at the end of it.
I understand.
You had a spot for the air unit, but it was just like about material that they kept up there. Nothing.
I got you.
So that was one room I wanted to check. So I told everybody, okay, everyone's going outside. I'm going to go up there. I had my camera with me. I was recording things. I was taking pictures. So I start going up the ladder. And this is another freaky thing that I can't explain to this day. So as I'm getting ready to go up the attic, I hear everyone laughing outside. So I know nobody's up there with me. So I get halfway up the attic steps, and I hear a heavy male voice right behind my ear yell at me, going, "Hey!" And I just stopped. I mean, it wasn't like I heard someone outside say something. It was somebody right behind my head. I turned around so quick, I look around. I was freaked out.
How close were you to anybody at that point? You're alone?
Alone. There was nobody in
Yeah,
there.
man. That ain't nothing to fuck with.
I'm halfway up the ladder, and I swear it was like within a couple feet behind my ear. I got up there quick. I turned around, took some pictures below me to see if anything was below there that captured.
This is the time during cell phones, right? So you're taking
No.
this with a Polaroid,
But,
or is it cell phones, or what was?
No, it's cell phone. Yeah, cell phone.
Okay, so there's a
Yep.
flash.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I've got like a little lighting system so I can illuminate some areas. So I run upstairs. I got my feet dangling down in the attic entryway, and there's like a light bulb up there that you can pull a drawstring. And I sit up there, and the moon is shining some light in there, so I can kind of see in corners and areas. I look, I see that drawstring. I'm taking pictures left and right. I'm looking around, doing things, and it's really still. I mean, there's no wind blowing. It's just suffocating. It's hot up there. And all of a sudden, I get done. I look back upstairs, and I see that drawstring from the light start waving, and I swing it. I didn't hit it. I wasn't even close enough to hit it. It's probably from here to a little bit past the chandelier where I can't
No
even
drafts.
reach it.
That's one of those things you could explain if there was a draft. If the window was open or something like that, you could easily explain it. But nothing's open.
No. So that thing, I mean, instantly,
That's how you
whatever
know.
was behind me, whatever was up there, that's the area where the suicide had happened.
Yeah.
So, and after, and to kind of bookend that, after that family moved out, I talked to another family that lived there. They said the same thing. The last family that I knew that lived in there contacted me, and she mentioned about an incident where, again, things were going crazy, and their attic caught on fire. The attic burnt down. So
Wow.
I think they repaired it. And your original question, nobody really stays. I think the longest, maybe my friend stayed there, maybe about 4 or 5 years. I think another family stayed there, similar.
Did they move out due to those reasons?
Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah, well, my friend's family, I know for sure that it tore them apart.
A little boy spirit, I feel like, wouldn't be malevolent. That's more playful. Do you think there was more than one entity in that house?
Absolutely.
Or because a little boy's not going to commit suicide?
Yeah.
You said there was a suicide in there.
Yeah.
Do you think there was something more violent besides the little boy, not as playful, not as noisy, something that drove that family to sleep in the living room?
Absolutely. I think there's definitely a female presence in there, and I think that was what was reported as far as the person that had committed suicide. There's definitely a male presence in there that the psychic had picked up on, that there was a sighting. My friend's mom had mentioned before, I remember growing up, and she mentioned that she had saw a woman apparition go through the wall going up toward the upstairs.
Okay.
She was her friend was a practicing white witch, and her friend was.
That makes things interesting, for
yeah,
sure.
Whether she dabbled in anything else,
Yeah.
we don't know. But I do know that she was very interesting with her beliefs, and I meant my friend's mom. I remember her reading us stories out of, I believe it was a demonologist, and that was the book that I didn't know back then, but I think that's the book that Ed Warren had written. And I remember
that's a big name.
And I remember reading this book. We were so fascinated. We were so scared because of the incidents that we were witnessing. She would read stories out of this, and a lot of the stories in there were, Amityville. But the one thing that came across that I remember when I was a kid, and I was terrified of, was she talked about this doll, and it showed the doll in this encased
Annabelle.
Annabelle.
Yeah.
And that's
it's like a Raggedy Ann doll nowadays.
A nod to my book, and that's actually I incorporated that into my book as a nod to growing up to that. And the movie and the series, The Conjuring, all that came out after I put that in my book.
Speaking of books, I would like to show you guys. We have a copy right here. Hey, looks like there's a lot of good stuff in here. So, The Silence. I really want to promote this. It was a pleasure talking to you. With that closing statement, I would like to say if you're a fan of Moonlit Nights, Candle Lights, and Poltergeist, then drop a like, because that's our mission and why we fill this disposition. Until next time, spooky tales, baby.